There's a strange kind of television segment that British daytime TV has basically perfected at this point. Put 2 or 3 panelists with wildly different opinions in front of a camera, open the phone lines, and just let the nation call in with their verdict on Prince Harry. It happens so often on so many different shows, with so many different rotating panelists, that at some point you start to wonder whether the actual news value has less to do with anything Harry did that week and more to do with the simple, reliable fact that putting his name on a segment guarantees people will passionately disagree with each other live on air. And honestly, that phenomenon itself might be more revealing than whatever the specific debate was actually about.
Would you like to see Harry come home? Nina?
Absolutely, of course. I would like to see Harry come back if he wanted to, but I would not want him to come back and be unhappy. As I've said many times and over the last few years, Harry and Meghan were pushed out by the royal family because they were more popular than William and Kate.
I think that's why.
They were more popular than William and Kate, and that could not be allowed to continue. And so they were pushed out of this country and pushed out of the royal life that they knew. I think that the royal family now is so sadly depleted. King Charles is battling cancer. William and Kate are in a tricky situation because Kate is also battling cancer. I know Charles had talked for many years about slimming down the monarchy, and it's been slimmed down for them. We have nobody. They keep trying to put people up. Here's Beatrice and Eugenie. What do we think about them? No. I mean, they say, what about the Zara, whatever her name is? And her husband. Australia's taken them to their hearts. Any Australian goes, who the hell are they? No, so who are they?
They're not getting anybody that packs a punch the same way that Harry and Meghan did.
No. Harry has an enormous charisma and warmth. And
well, he was the favourite for a very, very long
Absolutely.
time, and something just seemed to turn. The phone lines and speak to Doug from the West Midlands. You've been waiting over the break. What would you like to say?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, panel. There's a couple of points I'd like to make. Firstly, that I was in the forces the same as Harry and the same as Prince Andrew. So they've already showed their integrity, setting aside all the umbrella of glitz and glamour. Secondly, he's a father, and he's a father first, and blood is thicker than water. Harry may well be looked at as the prodigal son, and as our king, and being the head of the church, he goes to church all the time and accepts and understands the role of forgiveness and understanding. And thirdly, that he should be welcomed back regardless into the family.
Peril from Bedfordshire, what's your views on Harry coming back? Do you think it's likely? Do you think the royals will welcome him back with open arms?
Well, I would welcome him back with open arms. I think he should come back. After all, he goes through a lot as a young boy, and to see he grow up to be a man, married and have his own family. His mum didn't get to see the way he was going to turn out. So why everybody's getting on his case? They should just leave him and let him come back and make it up back with his father. And for the king, he of all person should sit down with him and talk to him as a son and say, we all make mistakes, let's start over again.
What do you think,
this is my
though?
rule.
I mean, it's one thing for his family and his father to invite him back and forgive his misgivings, if indeed that's what you think that Spare in the interview and all the other things were. But what about the British public? Do you think the British public are ready for that? I mean, quite a lot of people in Britain feel that he, turned his back on the UK. He chose America instead of us. He, according to some people, sold his family down the river for a book, for an interview. They're quite pained by that, Peril.
When we make mistake, we all put it down on papers. But I think if the public leave him and keep out of his business and think of their laundry.
So if he comes back, he has to I suppose, sort of expect that there's going to be some press intrusion?
Well, interestingly, because it was the Sun, the Mail in particular, and the Telegraph who dripped all sorts of poison about Meghan from just before the wedding, and it went on a daily basis for years until they were forced to go. Interesting, the Daily Mail over the last maybe 6 months or so, since the royal family has had its health problems and has been so depleted, there have been the odd story about Meghan in LA that has not been critical. That is just
scathing.
Not at all scathing, just saying, here's Meghan dressed like this going to lunch with blah, 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 which staggered me because the Mail for years has not been able to write a word about Meghan that is not negative.
So hold on, you think there's some other alternative motive, a plan?
Dipping a toe in the water. Just changing the tone.
I do agree they were quite awful to her.
Preparing the grounds in case they come. And while we're just to remind people, while we're talking about should Harry apologise, what should he apologise for, selling his father or his family down the river, he wrote a book called Spare, which told his side of the story. Now, that's not done in isolation. His mother did a book, and so did his father. So did Charles. They both wrote a book about...
But perhaps it didn't go into quite as much detail as Harry's. Harry's was very honest.
And so was Diana's.
Okay.
So was Diana's. So he's done nothing that his parents did not do.
All right. Peril, thank you very much for your call. Dorothy from Leeds, what's your view on this? Will you be welcoming Harry back with open arms?
I would welcome Harry and his family, and that's the point, Harry and his family. But I think the nation, the majority of the nation, would not welcome his wife, and that would cause the destruction of his marriage and also with his children.
Dorothy, that's interesting that you think that it would, instead of make them just move back and do this whole story again, that actually you think it could destroy his marriage. Do you not think Harry would just go, look, if you're not going to accept me and my family, I'm off again?
Well, that would be it. He either decides not welcome, stays with his family, or his family is welcome with him. But
Why do you think that his family won't be welcome?
Meghan wouldn't be welcome.
Why?
Because she's black.
Oh, you think it's just down to race?
Yes.
Do you agree with that, Lynn?
No, I do think that the press and the tone was racially motivated, driven towards her. I agree with that.
Welcome back to Royal Truth Desk. Today we're doing something a little different. Instead of chasing a single breaking headline, we're going to sit with one of these recurring televised debates about Harry's future, the kind featuring panellists going back and forth while callers phone in with their own takes and use it as a window into something bigger. Just how genuinely split public opinion on Harry still is years into this story, and what that split can actually tell us. If that kind of reflective breakdown is your thing, go ahead and subscribe now, because we've got a lot to work through today. Let's start with the panel side of these discussions, because it's genuinely one of the more consistent, well-documented elements across this whole recurring format. Broadcaster Nina Myskow has become something of a fixture on these panel debates over the years, appearing regularly on shows like Jeremy Vine and various GB News segments, specifically to weigh in on Harry and Meghan coverage. And her position, across multiple appearances, has been fairly consistent. She's argued publicly that Meghan was effectively pushed out of Britain, describing the pressure she faced as being driven both by the institution around the family and by the British press itself. In one memorable on-air exchange, she put it bluntly, arguing that Meghan was bullied out of the country by both the royal family and the media, and pushing back hard against fellow panellists who tried to frame the departure purely as a personal choice rather than something shaped by outside pressure. That's worth sitting with for a second, because it's a genuinely serious, considered position from someone with decades of experience in British media and entertainment journalism, not just a hot take tossed out for shock value. And, predictably, it hasn't gone unchallenged. In that same appearance, a fellow panelist pushed back directly, arguing from his own experience in journalism that outlets weren't handing down some coordinated editorial agenda against the Sussexes, and the two ended up in a fairly heated live disagreement about whether media hostility toward Meghan specifically was as organised or as severe as Myskow was describing. That kind of clash, one side arguing systemic pressure pushed Meghan out, the other side pushing back on the idea that there was ever a coordinated campaign against her, captures a lot of the actual shape of this ongoing debate in miniature. And that's really the through line across pretty much every version of these segments, regardless of which specific panelists or callers show up on a given day. You get one perspective arguing, essentially, that Meghan and Harry were treated unfairly by an institution and a press ecosystem that never really gave her a fair shot, and that their departure was less a rejection of the family and more a reasonable response to genuinely hostile treatment. And you get another perspective arguing that Harry's subsequent choices, the memoir, the documentaries, the interviews, represent an active, ongoing airing of private family matters in public, something that goes well beyond simply leaving quietly and moving on with life. Neither of those positions is coming out of nowhere. Both reflect real, documented events people can point to, and reasonable people genuinely land in different places depending on which of those events they weigh more heavily. Now, when it comes to the specific callers who phone into these segments, and there are, characteristically, a handful in nearly every episode of this format, generally offering everything from full-throated sympathy for Harry and Meghan to sharp criticism of what they see as an ongoing public airing of grievances. It's worth being honest about something. Individual caller opinions on live radio and TV phone-ins are, by their nature, off-the-cuff, unscripted, and rarely archived anywhere beyond the original broadcast. That means we can talk confidently about the broad pattern of what these callers tend to represent. A real cross-section of public sentiment, genuinely split roughly down the middle in a lot of polling on this exact question, without pretending we can perfectly reconstruct or verify the precise wording of any single caller's specific argument well after the fact. What we can say with confidence is that these call-in segments consistently surface the same handful of recurring arguments on both sides, again and again, which is itself pretty telling. On the sympathetic side, you'll typically hear versions of the argument Myskow makes, that Meghan, as a mixed-race American actress marrying into one of the most scrutinized families on the planet, faced a level and tone of media coverage that was measurably harsher than what other royal spouses have faced, and that Harry's protectiveness of his wife and children, even if it's come out in some dramatic, very public ways, is a fundamentally sympathetic response to watching someone he loves get treated badly. On the more critical side, you'll typically hear the argument that whatever legitimate grievances exist, choosing to relitigate them repeatedly in memoirs, documentaries, and high-profile interviews complicates any claim to simply wanting privacy, and that reconciliation becomes harder to take seriously if it's paired with continued public commentary on the very family you're supposedly trying to reconcile with. Here's the thing worth noting, though, when you actually hold those two positions side by side instead of treating them as pure opposites. They're not entirely incompatible. It's genuinely possible for someone to have faced unfair, harsh treatment from both press and institution, and to have also chosen afterward to respond to that treatment in ways that some people find understandable and others find excessive. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive, and honestly, a lot of the most reasonable-sounding callers on these shows tend to land somewhere in that more nuanced middle rather than at either extreme, sympathetic to the underlying grievance, while still having complicated feelings about exactly how it's been handled publicly since. It's also worth pointing out something that tends to get lost in the heat of these live debates. A meaningful chunk of the original hostility Meghan specifically faced in UK press coverage has been documented and studied fairly extensively at this point, including analysis pointing to noticeably different framing in headlines describing similar behaviour from Meghan versus other royal women. That's not really a contested point of opinion at this stage. It's something media researchers have actually gone and quantified. Whatever you think about how Harry and Meghan have subsequently handled their departure and their public commentary since, the premise that Meghan specifically faced disproportionately harsh coverage isn't just a talking point invented by sympathetic panelists. It has real research behind it. That context matters when you're evaluating the shape of these debates, because it suggests the "she was treated unfairly" side of the argument isn't purely a matter of personal sympathy. There's a documented pattern underneath it. But the subsequent public airing of grievances went too far side is more genuinely subjective, resting on individual judgments about where the line sits between legitimately explaining your own experience and repeatedly relitigating a family dispute in public. Both sides can be simultaneously reasonable, which might be exactly why this specific debate keeps resurfacing on panel shows years after the initial 2020 departure, without ever fully resolving in either direction. So why does public opinion remain this genuinely split years into the story? Probably because both underlying premises have real substance to them, and different people simply weigh those premises differently based on their own values around family privacy, media accountability, and how much benefit of the doubt public figures deserve when explaining painful personal experiences. That's not really a sign of confusion or fickle public opinion. It's a sign that this is a genuinely complicated situation with legitimate arguments pointing in more than one direction, which is a very different thing from a situation where one side is simply obviously right and the other is simply obviously wrong. It's also worth asking what these recurring debates are actually accomplishing at this point, beyond generating engagement for the shows hosting them. Do these segments actually shift public opinion meaningfully, or do they mostly function as a kind of ritual reaffirmation, where people who already sympathise with Harry and Meghan find validation in Myskow-style arguments, and people who've already soured on the couple find validation in the more critical panelists and callers? Based on how consistently these debates seem to land in roughly the same split year after year, it's hard to argue these segments are doing much actual persuading. They mostly seem to be giving already formed opinions somewhere to go and be reaffirmed on live television. And maybe that's honestly fine. Not every piece of media coverage needs to move the needle or resolve a debate. Sometimes it's just useful as a genuine snapshot of where public sentiment currently sits on a still unresolved, still evolving family story. The fact that these debates keep happening, keep drawing passionate callers from both directions, and keep featuring panelists willing to defend genuinely different readings of the same underlying events tells you something real. This story hasn't calcified into a settled public verdict the way a lot of royal controversies eventually do. People are still actively working out how they feel about it, which, frankly, might be the most honest state for public opinion on a situation this genuinely complicated to be in. So here's what we want to know from you tonight. Where do you personally land on this? Do you find yourself more sympathetic to the "she was treated unfairly" and his response is understandable reading, more persuaded by the "legitimate grievances don't excuse ongoing public airing" argument, or somewhere in that messier middle we talked about? And more specifically, do you think public opinion has genuinely shifted at all in recent years? Or does it feel like the exact same split we saw back in 2020, just with new panelists and new callers repeating the same core arguments? Drop your honest take in the comments. We'd genuinely love to hear real disagreement down there rather than everyone landing in the same place. Before we wrap up, if you appreciated us actually sitting with the substance of this debate instead of just picking a side and running with it, do us a favour and subscribe to Royal Truth Desk if you haven't already. And turn on notifications so you catch it the next time we dig into one of these recurring conversations. If you're already subscribed, drop a like, share this with someone who's been glued to these panel debates for years, and let us know in the comments which caller argument, sympathetic or critical, you think has actually aged the best. And one last thought before we go. Maybe the reason this exact debate keeps returning to our screens year after year isn't because nobody's figured out the right answer yet. Maybe it's because there genuinely isn't one single right answer here. Just a family situation, complicated enough that thoughtful, well-informed people keep landing in meaningfully different places, and probably will keep doing so for a long while yet. Stay curious, stay generous toward the people who see it differently than you do, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching Royal Truth Desk.